Hello, my name is David Johnson, and today I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about Tibetan Buddhism and the sort of cultural genocide that the Chinese Communist Party has been inflicting upon it. First of all, brief overview of Buddhism. There are three main schools of Buddhism: Mahayana, Theravada, and Vajrayana. Um, Mahayana and Theravada are the two oldest, with Vajrayana being a newer sort of variant of Mahayana. So Tibetan Buddhism is actually only a Vajrayana. So that means that when people think of Buddhism, they think of the Dalai Lama and that kind of imagery, but that is actually only the Vajrayana school Tibetan Buddhism. So that's just how sort of chief among different Buddhist schools of thought Tibetan Buddhism has become, which is why part of the reason why this is so significant. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual and political leader of Tibet, the first one dating all the way back to the 15th century. We're currently on our 14th, and he's currently living in exile right now. Hasn't been able to return to his home country of Tibet, living in northern India for over 50 years, which is crazy to think about. Then we have the Panchen Lama, who is sort of this Archbishop of Canterbury to the Pope figure, this kind of second-ranking member of the Buddhist clergy. If the Dalai Lama is the Pope, then the Panchen Lama is the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's got a huge role in the Buddhist reincarnation process. He and the Dalai Lama are what's known as these twin spirits, these twin souls who can identify each other through reincarnation cycles, through death. So when one of them dies, the other will have the final say on who actually is the next reincarnation of the Panchen or the Dalai Lama, which is why what's happened to the 11th and most current Panchen Lama is so distraught. Makes people so distraught because he has been kidnapped by the Chinese Communist Party. And I'll just touch briefly on what happened to the 10th Panchen Lama, who was actually jailed by China and placed in solitary confinement for the majority of his 8 years in prison, remained under house arrest long after, and would often be paraded through the streets during China's Cultural Revolution. And a little history of Tibet. It first became a unified country, empire even, in the 7th century AD. But part of Tibet's history is that it's really, they have learned how to live under occupation and other rulers. They've been occupied by the Yuan dynasty, the Mongols, the Qing dynasty, the Republic of China for a brief period of time, and the Chinese Communist Party. So this has been in their cultural code for centuries. And they have a dual system of government, meaning that the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader, he will advise their sort of prime minister, political leader figure on how to lead their people and the country. Touch briefly on the 10 stages of genocide that look a little different in cultural genocide versus physical genocide. But we'll talk about classification, which is this whole us versus them thing. You make a divide between us, which is in this case the Han Chinese, and them, the people of Tibet. And China has been ruthless in doing this, actually migrating Han Chinese into Tibet, like giving them major incentives to go settle there and sort of make the Tibet a minority in their own homeland. And denial as well, the final stage. China is ruthless at, they deny any evidence of this happening. They've kidnapped the 11th Panchen Lama. They deny that. They have these mass slaughterings and they've been in protests. They completely deny, very effective at shutting down international backlash and outrage. So cultural genocide, again, is actually just the destruction of the structures and practices that allow a certain group to continue as a group and like continue their cultural traditions, rather than physical genocide, where is of course the awful mass killings of a certain people that will happen. It's just a brief rundown. Crimes of the CCP. They liberated, invaded Tibet in 1954. The Dalai Lama was soon exiled after, self-imposed, but feared for his safety, and has not been comfortable enough to return to Tibet since. 80,000 native Tibetans joined him. There's the rest of the 10th Panchen Lama that I previously mentioned, the Cultural Revolution, where the traditions of Tibet were trying to be torn down by saying not supporting this new communist rule, and the kidnapping of the 11th Panchen Lama, where China, 3 days after the Panchen Lama was identified by the Dalai Lama, kidnapped the boy at 6 years old and his entire family. And they have not been seen in public since. And reincarnation must follow Chinese laws and regulations despite cultural traditions, excuse me. And lastly, I'll just close with xenocentrism, belief and practice of viewing the world from a Chinese perspective, implied belief, consciously or subconsciously, in the preeminence of Chinese culture. We see this often in broader terms, the Uyghur genocide, cleansing these people who are not Han Chinese, and the Confucius Institutes, which have tried to infiltrate upper academia in various countries around the world. But yes, so this is my brief overview of the cultural genocide of the CCP over Tibetan Buddhism and the Tibetan people. Thank you.